Yo there guys, this is Cob, and this is the third video in the series of demon guides. Just like the others, we'll be looking at how to effectively use a certain pet, which macros we can use with it, as well as where the demon should be used. So far we've talked about imps and fell hunters. In this video we will be talking about the Succubus. As always, let's start with a speedy overview of the Succubus itself and how each Grimoire affects it. The Succubus is a pet which casts most of its main abilities but deals damage through melee attacks called Lash of Pain. Its most noteworthy ability is Seduction, a channeled charm effect which will CC a target for 8 seconds, however, will break instantly if the target takes damage. The Succubus also has a passive invisibility and the ability to knock people back with the spell Whiplash. Speccing into Grimoire of Supremacy creates the Shivara, converting Whiplash into Fell Lash and Lash of Pain into Blade Dance, which all in all just means more damage. Summoning a second Succubus with Grimoire of Service will have this second pet cast Seduction on its target, though it has to be a humanoid target, and after that it will just deal basic damage. And finally, sacrificing a Succubus grants you the ability Whiplash. Now for some macros for the pet before we get our teeth into some clips, and don't worry, there really aren't too many. A mouse over seduction macro. This macro is one I like to use a lot in Battlegrounds, and with a bit of practice it can be an easy and quick way to CC a target in a group fight. I like it because you don't need to set a focus target just to use it, which can be a little bit fiddly in a big BG group fight. Next we have a focus seduce macro, and this is a macro that I barely ever use in Battlegrounds, but it is needed to CC healers in arenas, and by arenas I mean 2v2 arenas, not 3v3 ever, but we'll come to that later though. Now this macro isn't so much about the Succubus, but I think it is important to mention in this video too. The Focus Service Fell Hunter macro. This macro summons your Grimoire of Service Fell Hunter onto your focus target, ensuring he casts his spell lock on it and not on your main target. I bring this up in this video because in a lot of cases your Succubus is best played with the Grimoire of Service, and you'll see why in just a few seconds. It's worth noting before we move on that if you're using the Succubus, it is highly advisable to use the Glyph of Demon Training, so every seduction used will clear the target of any magic dots, just to make sure that the CC won't instantly break if you have an Immolate or Curse on someone who you want to CC. Now one last thing before the clips, a tip about the Succubus seduction spell itself. The ability Seduction is supposed to break immediately when the target of the CC takes damage. However, if you begin casting a spell before the Seduction lands, that spell will not break the Seduction. A clip here taken from my latest BG and World PvP montage shows this. Notice how the first Chaos Bolt does not break my pet's Seduction, allowing me to land 2 Chaos Bolts back to back just to burst down this priest. Okay, so when should the Succubus be your pet of choice, and with which Grimoire overall? Let's start with Battlegrounds. Now, I've mentioned before that Battlegrounds are one of the most diverse ways of PvPing in the game. There's no knowing what classes or specs you're going to run into a lot of the time. And this is one of the reasons that I don't like using the Grimoire of Supremacy for the Succubus. The Succubus is very strong against most melees, but it can be very weak against casters. Having a Shivara basically increases your pet's damage, and all of its abilities actually do the same thing as the Succubus. So to me it doesn't make a great deal of sense to be running with it in the Battlegrounds. Next, Grimoire of Service, my absolute favourite Grimoire for Succubus gameplay in BGs, and this is because you have tools like Whiplash to knock people back, Seduction to CC people just as usual, and you are able to summon either a Voidwalker or a Fell Hunter with Grimoire of Service, depending on what you're fighting. Summoning a Voidwalk will cause him to disarm your target, which is perfect against melees. And as for casters, you can see in this example clip that I'm up against a Frost Mage, and I'm able to counter him with a spell lock from my Service Fell Hunter. Basically, using a Succubus with Service gives you access to all of the tricks a Succubus has, like the knockbacks and extra CC, as well as an extra Fell Hunter spell lock or Voidy Disarm. This makes you extremely versatile and is why I use this spec most of the time when recording for my big movie releases. Just to push over Grimoire of Sacrifice, it's almost never worth using with a Succubus in BGs. As always with Sac spec you gain more burst, but in this case you pay for it big time by losing Seduction, which is probably the strongest thing about the Succubus. Okay, moving on to arenas, and before we get into it, I pretty much would never recommend using a Succubus in any bracket of arena other than 2v2s. In 3v3 and certainly 5v5 it will die within the first minute of every game, almost without fail. Your opponents will see that you're using it and will just kill it immediately, as she is very squishy. I would also not recommend using it anyway, as a spell lock or even an imp dispel is generally more useful. So for 2v2, Supremacy can actually be okay. I'd recommend this if you're just getting used to Succubus gameplay and want some general practice though. For me, having a spell lock to use via the Service Grimoire still makes it superior in my eyes. I was pretty surprised actually at how well the Succubus performed in 2s when I was recording these clips. The seductions you'll find will give you a lot more time to damage, as you don't need to cast any fears, and you can use their knockback to throw people off of edges, or even knock your kill target out of his healer's line of sight, as you can see me doing just here. And to quickly brush over Sacrifice, it is not worth it in arenas. Sacrificing a pet and only gaining Whiplash, which isn't useful in most arenas, is just a bad trade-off considering you could have Spell Lock or again an Imp Dispel. So in conclusion, for Succubus Battleground play, I'd go for Grimoire of Service. The ability to Spell Lock or disarm someone with the Service Fellhunter or Voidy is amazing when put alongside the control and knockback utility of a Succubus. It's awesome too for solo and team play, but a Supremacy Imp might just have the edge when it comes to team play. In arenas, never ever use a Succubus in 3v3 or 5v5. You'll be nerfing yourself by doing this, trust me. But in 2v2 as double DPS, it can be very strong, giving you more time to damage instead of sitting there spamming fears. Be creative with your Whiplash knockback too. It can be awesome in the right circumstance and totally unexpected to players who don't know how the Succubus works. Alright guys, this was the third in the series of Demon Control here on the Warlock channel. I really hope that you learned something new about the Succubus gameplay. The next video will cover Voidwalkers, which means I've got a lot of homework to do, so until then, thanks again for watching and I will catch you all later.